2.0.
Wow.
It's a revamped opportunity zone law that's coming down the pipe. So the reason why the tax revenue argument that she was trying to concoct is fake, that you can tell it's a pretext, is because all the developers in town have access to and always take advantage of what's called the MFTE. It's a tax exemption.
Okay.
Developers do not have to pay property taxes on the developments that they put up. So Spyglass, Marina Square, Quincy Square, the developers of that are all Sound West Group, and they do not have to pay any property
For
tax.
10 years, I think it is.
Yeah.
8 or 10 years.
Right now, the MFT is 8 years. The real problem is that DCD basically does whatever it wants. Unless the public,
Wait, why would we give them a tax break for 10 years?
That's a wonderful question.
Because, yeah, tell them what they say they do it for.
Whether it's 8 years or 10 years, I think it's 8 years. This is what the developers always say. And in fact, they said it when they got angry at us for protesting this at council. What they said was, if we don't have this MFTE tax break, it's in effect a subsidy, we won't be able to get lenders interested in our projects. And I know this because this was an attachment to the letter in which Sound West Group exhorted the city to gag us for not being respectful. Mm-hmm. So this is the talking points of the developers in town, and in fact of Denise Fry and the majority of council. If we don't give them these tax breaks, we won't get this development. Now,
wait, hold on. So can I go and say, hey, if you don't give me this tax break, the bank won't give me a loan? I mean, I can't do that, right?
No, they say that. I brought it to their attention at a meeting, and I remember Denise made the case about how, it's so hard for them, and the lumber costs so much, and they just really need some help. And I said, what help?
I could use some help with.
Me too.
I mean, help me understand this.
I know.
I would love to purchase a home, but
yeah.
I'm going to need a tax break for 10 years so that I can buy this home, because it just doesn't pencil out for me. And it's just so hard for me because, what?
It has been this is a very unpopular provision for most rank and file voters, homeowners, property owners. Your mom and pop, your grandpops, they have to pay those taxes. They can't get around it.
So let me ask you this. Are all the development that we see, and if you look around, everyone, are there MFTEs on all of this stuff? Are there no taxes being paid on any of these new?
This is the multifamily category, the term multifamily, the density building that all the developers want, that Denise Fry is constantly harping. It gets the MFTE tax subsidy. They don't have to pay taxes.
So that might explain why we're having a deficit in money problems here in our county and in our city. If we just collected the taxes from our developers, maybe we might actually.
Yeah. And
wow.
In my opinion, I don't think that.
I don't understand.
In my opinion, I don't think everyone involved in it is coming at it from an evil place. I do feel like people in government are given these toolkits, and they are given these speeches where the speeches omit information, right? So if you're not a really well-rounded, understand how this works, you can easily be fooled. And I think they can be fooled by it too. And so the point of it was that they would bring in affordable housing, and that this was a way that they said they could do it. But the very wealthy always find these inherent loopholes to basically invoke the name of the poor to get benefits for themselves.
And so, but there's a difference between affordable and market rate, which I think what they really mean is market rate, because $1,000 per bedroom, and we're seeing $1,800 a month, $1,850, $2,100, $2,250. I mean, we're seeing craziness. Who's affording that? And then I just read and watched another podcast on people that are being marketed to, or folks in Redmond and Bellevue saying, hey, come over here. So it's not even for the residents that are living here, right?
It's for people who aren't here yet. And I talked to the governor's office about that the other day, and his representative had actually thought that was funny. I said that because that's something he says a lot too. So other people are acknowledging this and understanding what we're doing. Just so you know, they do use something called AMI typically. And I don't know if people understand how affordability is based. It's not based on the $64,000 a year common resident. AMI includes all the regions around us. So the area median income. So they'll use Bainbridge Island, Seattle, Silverdale, like every community around us. And then they'll take like, or Bainbridge's average income is quadruple or whatever what Bremerton is. So they'll take all of that and average that. And that's how they make the semantics game of what affordability is. And then when we say, can you please adjust the AMI to only, because they can do this by law. We've asked the city to do this, but they laughed at us for some reason, which is why we keep digging, is because they keep being very condescending to us. We're like, what's going on? These people are out of control. So that's why we kept digging their own behavior and absurd responses to things that would help the community. That's what has made us stay in the long game here. Because they're unwilling to adjust the AMI. We've asked them to this area because they say, no, the poor developers they would never come here. But there's so many other developers that would, and this one particular one is really monopolizing this whole region.
So not only are they're getting a tax break because it won't pencil out, and they want it for 8 years. And if I remember correctly, I was working with Jane Robolowski. They were trying to get it for 12 years. Right. And the fight was to settle on trying to get it down to 8. Right.
Yeah.
And that was the horse trade. But also there's this big push for multimodal transportation and traffic calming and all these other things. And it's also not going to pencil out for them to make driveways because, the cost. Right. So they're trying to cut costs on the other side and not actually give people the true home experience. Right. Because you don't even need a car now.
Yeah.
Right. So, and public transit here in Kitsap is not adequate enough. So, go ahead and get on the bus, that doesn't run in the way that you need to. And for those of us that are blessed to have a car and can drive around and get around to Silverdale and move about how we need to, or go to Costco and do our major shopping in Walmart and spend $200 or $300 and then go to our doctor's appointments and everywhere else. Oh, well, that's fine. But for the other person, well, you might be only able to get on the bus and go one place, right? But God forbid you got to get your kid to childcare and then go to school, or maybe go to work, or maybe you have to go to treatment, or whatever else you have to do. It's almost impossible.
You can live where you work. Like how many? This happens in other countries too. Like this is just a study of what happens all over the world, and so that's why there's so many experts that understand what's happening, but they're getting blocked, and then they're pitting all of us against one another. The right, the left, the middle, the poor, the rich. We're all pitted against each other. We're fighting like each other and down at people below us instead of like calling out the people above us who are creating these policies and who are contributing to this incredible problem.
So it's kind of weird. I thought it was a meritocracy, but you're telling the poor and the homeless to pull yourself up on the bootstraps, but the developers need all these tax breaks. And
let me say something, because what I see is that when we make these general statements, these assessments of our political reality right now, people hear them and we have all become used to becoming cynical, because we know that that's how the world is, right? It's a fake meritocracy. We actually have an oligarchy. So people kind of, their eyes glaze over and they kind of accept it. The problem with Bremerton for developers and is that I'm kind of a dweeb, right? I'm kind of a legal ferret. I'm just wired to be that way because of what I did for attorneys, some of whom were great attorneys, fat cat attorneys, but really great attorneys. And so they needed someone who could do the things that can become mind-numbing, right? So my part of the functions for a paralegal is to do Freedom of Information Act requests. What Kimmy has just said, and we can actually demonstrate actually happening in Bremerton. When we were getting ready for the MFTE hearing, which took place September 3rd of 2025, we protested. It was a large group of citizens protesting that. It was unfair. I specifically told counsel to their face, because I have to. I said, you don't have to kowtow to the developers. This is something that benefits Sound West Group. And so I was grossed out by it because it went from a moratorium on the MFTE so we can find out how we can actually get low income built. That was literally how Jane Rebolowski started that conversation. And by the end of that arc, they had changed the goalpost, flipped the script. And so we can see Denise Fry going off, waggling her head, and basically saying how tired she was of our criticism. And she basically said, I am not in cahoots with developers. Well, guess what? We got her emails. And in these emails, she reaches out to Jack Paul again and Marianne Weber. They are Sound West Group partners. And she says, hey, we need to get together. I just met this reporter from the Kitsap Sun. And if we have a conversation and clue her in, maybe we can get her to write us a piece. So this is a situation where Denise Fry, again, is doing something behind closed doors. She reaches out to Sound West Group. And Jack Paul became a planning commissioner, by the way. So this is a Sound West Group partner who has instantaneous transmission of information from inside city government, is city government, and he can relay it instantly to his boss, Wesley Larson. So Denise Fry tells Jack Paul and Marianne Weber, you guys are going to be the experts for the MFTE. You see her in the emails telling the reporter, who's an intern, so she's new, she's green, and she tells the intern reporter, I consider Marianne Weber our go-to on the MFTE. They tell me that without the MFTE, these developments wouldn't happen. So this cub reporter eventually comes out with a puff piece on the MFTE, which is, of course, completely on the side of developers. This article doesn't actually even describe their calculations or how they arrive at this point. The reporter writes this really weird kind of imagery of Marianne Weber at some, computer making her calculations, in which Marianne Weber says, it has to pencil out. If we don't get it past a certain margin, it's just not going to happen. So this puff piece does not explain at all why the MFTE has to happen the way they want it to happen. What we are talking about is developers having the inside track, cutting corners, having immediate access to a council member. And the developer is inside planning commission. So they've decided that they're going to have the MFTE tax break no matter what. So we have, it must have been like 12 to 15 citizens. It was a good turnout. And we were all basically begging, why can't we have a rational policy? Why can't you adjust the AMI so it reflects the reality of Bremerton? And that was September 3rd. By September 9th, again in emails, we have a letter from Sound West Group asking the city to gag us, essentially, at the public forum. And the city council did. So for over half a year, we actually were gagged from speaking freely at council unless we went through the filter of what they decided could be spoken on listed agenda items. So this is an example of when you use the law and get Public Records Act requests, because Washington does have a strong transparency policy under the Public Records Act request and the open. It's one of the best in the country. So when we utilize this, you get to see the truth behind the PR, behind the empty talk. And what keeps coming up is that Denise Fry, for lack of a better description, Denise Fry is an agent. She is an operative for the fat cat developers in town. There is no other way to describe how she functions. She's doing this for the BHA shelter sabotage. She's doing this for the secret plans they have for Harrison Heights. They call it a master plan. She did this for the Evergreen Point project. You literally have her on record saying, if we don't do what they want, we will stagnate and die. So she has some really perverse language. in which she's
stagnate and die.
yeah. When they put Jack Paw in the planning commission, they had a study session, and if you see it, you'll actually immediately feel sorry for Jane Rebelowski and Anna Mockler, because they put up the most tepid and sad-looking objection. And when they make this objection, they already look beaten, and they are actually conceding that they are not going to stop the installation of Jack Paw into the planning commission. But Anna Mockler makes this, Mockler basically asserts a principle of conflict of interest. She says, I asked a bunch of people around me, and I gave them the scenario, what do you think about a prominent developer being in the planning commission? And Mockler says, and everyone except one told me that it looks like a conflict of interest. And she said one person of that group said, that might be useful. So, and then Mockler ends her assertion of principle. Unfortunately, this is how she ends most of her assertions of principle. She basically says something like, I know I'm in the minority, so I won't buck. I'll vote for his installation into planning commission. So what you will see is Denise Fry basically berate Anna Mockler and Jane Rebelowski. And what she says is, there is a lot of misunderstanding. She might have used the word misinformation. There is a lot of misunderstanding about what real conflict of interest is. And she goes on and she says, I'm really offended. Development is not the F word. There's a lot of stereotypes about developers. So she does this full-throated, weird, almost like she had the power of hypnosis, and she felt confident in giving this completely erroneous, bad faith tirade about how putting a Soundwest Group partner in the planning commission would not be conflict of interest. And it was so wrong, and it's been wrong every week Jack Paw has been on that commission. I have called it a fiasco. I've gone to the planning commission and council, and I said, that is a fiasco. You're making the planning commission into a kangaroo court. And the reason why is because for the preceding year, I gave council, every part of city government, legal briefs, citations, facts, oral comments, that what Andrea Spencer and Garrett Jackson and Kelly Lambert did, not only to the Evergreen project, but to the Shoreline Master Program, is they twisted it and turned it around and really just basically flouted this primary fundamental law, the shoreline management, in such a way that Jack Paw's project, the Evergreen Point, was given a bloated value that it legally should never have had by using an artifice to increase the legal height from 35 feet to 61 feet. They basically gave that project a bloated value of $15 million. Now, when you look at the paperwork for that project, Jack Paw's name is all over it. He's literally called the project representative in the MFTE paperwork for the Evergreen Point. So there is no universe in which it is okay for a Soundwest Group partner, especially the director of Soundwest Group, the project representative of the Evergreen Point, to be on the planning commission.
I just want to read this for everyone. It's on the screen, but for those of you that are just listening, a conflict of interest is a situation where a person's private interests, such as money, family, or friendships, could interfere with their professional duties or honest judgment. It means a person is in a position of trust, but their personal life might tempt them to make a biased choice, right? So it doesn't mean that you or she is monetarily profiting from it, right? And so I think I've heard them say, look, I'm not making any money off of this. And that is just one element of conflict of interest. And that's what they focus on. But there's a friendship there. There's a relationship there. And it does appear to be a conflict of interest. So I just wanted to read that definition there, because I think that is the point that you have been making all of these months.
We don't have any video. We don't have any proof that cold hard cash has exchanged hands. I don't bother talking if I don't have a basis for what I'm saying. So I don't go there, and there's actually no reason to go there. What we see is that they have worked on this project for a long time. This project has a 15-year history. Larson took it, basically bought it at the end of 2019, that we know from public records, although he might have had his hand on it earlier. But by late 2019, that was his project. It was Jack Paul's project. And here's the other part that makes it a conflict of interest, is because there have been shenanigans about how they legally treated that project. And when I say legally, I'm talking about the surface. In American history, in American legal culture and tradition, we all know that a law can be illegal. There is such a thing as illegal law. And when that is the case, that law is void or voidable. So that is liability. And because this has involved government officials helping a private interest, there are all kinds of implications, right? There are criminal violations here. There are violations of ethics. There's a potential racketeering. So this, not only are they interested in a pecuniary way that involves money, they're also interested in not getting in trouble with the law. And there are also here antitrust implications too. When you have a developer this powerful, everyone's afraid of sound Westgroup, this dominant of city government officials and public processes, that is an oligopoly. At a minimum, it's an oligopoly. It could be a cartel, but it is minimally an oligopoly. So when you have an oligopoly having enough influence over government processes that they can bloat up the value of a project like the Evergreen Point, and not only that, the way they did it isn't a technicality. They chose to basically run roughshod, to flout. This is a law, and this is where the dweeb part of Jose comes in, so you can cut me off if you need to. The Shoreline Management Act isn't just a statute, it's constitutionally based. And it is not only constitutionally based, it comes from an ancient principle called the public trust doctrine. This principle has existed since Roman times. It has existed in merry old England, in medieval England. The public trust doctrine is this principle that if you're going to be a sovereign, if you're going to rule, you can't rule over a people who are dead. So the sovereign has this essential underlying duty to take care of the natural resources. It's fundamental. It's actually even pre-constitution. As soon as a state in the United States has a ratified constitution, the public trust doctrine kicks in. That's when it takes effect. So it is impossible for a municipality to find a way to make the Shoreline Management Act disappear, either for one person or for 5 people. Can't be done. And unfortunately, in Bremerton, the planners have been so used to rigging stuff, and the developers have been so used to being coddled by the planners that they did it quite easily. So they put out representations into the public square, into their actual presentations to the public, and they found a way to create loopholes. I call them Trojan horses. And I can tell you, they call them interrupted buffers and Map E. Map E is the interrupted buffer for the Evergreen Point. And so this is a gimmickry. It's an artifice. And in this gimmickry, they essentially decided to wave their magic wand. And they say, well, our isolated code means that we don't have to apply the Shoreline Management Act. It's so isolated, don't worry about it. And you know what the key feature of this gimmick is? They say if a road abuts or is part of a shoreline parcel, forget about it. The Shoreline Management Act no longer matters. So this is an extremely legally repugnant nullity. And because there aren't enough, dweeby Jose's out there, they got away with it. When I finally came across it, I told the city, whoa, wait a minute. you've been doing this so long, this has basically tainted the continuum of the permitting of the Evergreen Point, so this is void. So, and when I said that, do you know why I said that?
Why?
Because I was only half educated. I had just gotten far enough in my research to catch on to the existence of the Shoreline Management Act, to catch on to Map E, and to realize that, well, this is a special favor. It's forbidden in Washington's Constitution. You can't create an enactment that only applies to one man. And that's what they did with the interrupted buffer they call Map E. So just having apprised myself of that, I didn't know an ocean worth of Shoreline Management Act jurisprudence surrounding that basic key feature of the rigging of the Evergreen Point. But I looked outside and there were road signs all along Sheldon between Smith Cove and the Evergreen Park, and the site of the Evergreen Point is Sheldon Boulevard, and they put up road signs, which I had never seen. So they were ready to start building that project, I believe. So I naively, as a good citizen, contacted the Kitsap Sun and the city government through an email, and I basically said, wait a minute, we've just gotten wind that the city has engaged in misconduct in the Evergreen Point permitting, and that makes this irremediably void, right? And within a couple of hours, I peeked outside and the road signs were gone. No work went on, the road signs went up and they went down. So we convinced them that something was rotten in Denmark, and this project was ready to go. We got notice. It was ready to rock and roll. But when we told them that it was void because of intentional misconduct, they stopped. And that was 2.5 years ago. So that 57 million project was stopped in its tracks because we told them that the law would never support that project going up at 61 feet. Since then, they have worked in the background. They've never come out with an official decision that it was granted or denied, and that has kept us from appealing it. So even the way that they have stalled this project is gimmickry and basically a different kind of partisanship. And for context, an agency like Andrew Spencer is never supposed to be partisan. You cannot pick the side of developers or the side of homeowners or property owners. You have to apply the law as it exists objectively. You have to do this in good faith. So again, this is, I've said it over and over again, this is an endemic problem with the city, is that they are so partisan for developers that they will actually erase law, skew law, warp law, violate law, basically every which way they can. So that's actually how Robin and I started with Friends of Smith Cove and a handful of neighbors. We kept asking for questions and they gaslit us. They simply never mentioned the Shoreline Management Act. So we had to kind of find out the hard way with I was a bit out of practice, but eventually I got to the nitty gritty. I found the law, and what we realize now, again, from Public Record Act request, is that within 3 months of me showing up, the first time I showed up in City Council in person to protest was December 18, 2024. And I got to comment twice. And then, of course, I went home. I actually told them I'm tired of being silenced. Went home. And now the Public Records Act request that we recently received show that Anna Mockler reached out to the Department of Ecology